Good afternoon. This is Sucheta with Travel Talk. Welcome to my second episode. And good afternoon if you are on the East Coast of US, and hello and welcome to everybody else around the world. So I'm really excited today because we're talking about traveling for cheap, which I have so much to tell you about. There's a lot of stuff that I would like to cover today, and I would like to answer any questions that you may have on this subject because I know you are here because you love to travel and you want to get some insights into how you can make travel affordable so you can go more often. Now, I personally have traveled to more than 80 countries and most of them for free, if not cheap. Just this year alone, I went to New York a couple of times, Guatemala, St. Croix, San Francisco, Yosemite, Napa Valley, Alabama, Tennessee, St. Lucia, Martinique, Romania, India twice, Moldova, Ukraine, Poland, Sri Lanka, Austria. Yes, and I still have two more trips remaining for the end of the year, and it's December 5th already. So, how am I doing all of this? Obviously, I'm not making millions of dollars from my travel writing and from my blog, but I do get to travel quite a bit, either for free or I pay for my own expense, but make it really, really cheap. So before we get into all of that, I have a couple of questions from you guys, from the viewers from our first episode. Janice wanted to ask if I make money from my blog. Because I had talked about how you can start your blog and put advertisement if you want to, or some link backs. And I said, I don't really do a lot of that. So Janice, the response is yes and no. So I do make some money from my blog, but it's through sponsored posts. And by the sponsored posts, I mean is there are campaigns to promote a destination. So for example, Iceland tourism may be wanting to promote trips to their country. And I have been to Iceland before, and they reach out to me to write something on my blog based on my experience and my own travels, my previous visits, and they pay me a certain amount for writing that post. So I do get paid from my blog to write sponsored posts for that, but I don't really do a lot of advertising and link backs. And then we had a question from Tushar in New Delhi, and he wanted to know how to connect with people in places that you don't know anyone, especially within India. And Tushar, India is such a friendly destination. People reach out to you even if you're standing on the train station and want to take you to show them their city or invite you home for dinner. So I feel like that's a place that you shouldn't have any problem finding locals to make friends with. Now, the best way to go about in India would be probably reaching out to your friends and your family members and connecting through them to see if they can connect you to someone they know in the city that you're trying to go visit. And with a billion people, I'm sure you can find some degree of separation to connect you to other people. But we will cover more on this topic on how to connect with locals to places that you are going to next month, on January 16th in one of our episodes. So come back, definitely join in for that. Now let's talk about traveling for cheap. Now, when I started traveling back in the days of, obviously, I didn't even think about being a travel writer. I just wanted to travel for fun, as some of you may be looking to do that. And at that point in time, there was no question about getting a sponsored post because I wasn't writing, I wasn't providing any service to the places I was going to visit. So in that time, when I started traveling, it was more about being resourceful of how I am spending money for my own travels, but in the best way possible. Let's talk about flights. That's the most expensive part of your trip. For flights, I started using Sky Miles a lot. Now, if you have an airline that is a hub in the destination in the city that you live in my case, it's Delta for Atlanta. I got a credit card that had 3 times miles for every point that I charge on it. So I would pay everything using the credit card, from my groceries, my bills, my utilities, everything was going on the credit card. And I would get about 3,000 miles to 10,000 miles a month, which is quite a lot. You can get a domestic ticket for about 25,000 miles round trip. And then I also joined a bank. So even my banking, personal banking, was done with a bank that provides miles for every charge using my debit card. So even that was accumulating a lot of miles. And then I would just pay off the cards in full every month and use them as a transaction rather than a credit limit. And then using the Delta Sky Miles American Express card, I also got free companion tickets once a year. And that allows you another 2 round trips to anywhere in the US. Now, recently, I also joined an American Express Platinum card, and that gives you 60,000 miles for your first 3 months of charges. So there you have it. You already have a round trip ticket to Europe for free. So miles using cards is a great way to accumulate free flights. And that's pretty much how I pay for a lot of my trips still when flights are not sponsored. Then I subscribe to a lot of travel alerts, flight alerts. So I have a list of destinations that I'm interested in going to over the next few months. I go on all these websites like Google Matrix, Airfare Watchdog, Skyscanner, and I put in the destinations from where I'm flying to where, and even my city where I live in, what are the deal alerts. And I get these every single day. Yes, and I always read those emails. Sometimes they are multiple times a day, but it's worth it because you can get very, very cheap flights. And you just have to act on it, though. Those flights go away within an hour. So it's not something you can think about, hey, I want to go there and book those flights. You have to act on it. I'll tell you about a recent trip I did where my husband and I went to Eastern Europe for 2 weeks. We flew on a Polish airline from Atlanta to Warsaw, and we paid about $500 round trip for that flight, which we paid on our own. And first stop we went to is Moldova, a country I did not really know much about till recently. The way I got to go to Moldova is because I was doing a book signing in in Huntsville, Alabama. And this one lady who bought all 4 of my books, Beato Goes to, in case you haven't checked out my books, they're children's picture books about travel. And she bought all 4 of my books, and she came and introduced herself to me when I was signing them and said that, well, you've traveled to 80 plus countries, but you haven't been to Moldova and you need to go and visit. And I said, sure, I'd love to. I just don't know anyone there and I don't know anything about it. So she said, don't worry about it. I will contact my friends, my family, and they'll host you and we'll arrange everything. So this trip that my husband and I took to Poland, we first flew to Moldova. My friend, this lady I met, her brother picked us up from the airport. We stayed at his house for 4 days, and him and his friends took us around the country to show us all the attractions. Then we went to Ukraine. We just took a train over there, and we stayed in some cheap hotels, but very centrally located. And we did a lot of walking and explored the city on our own. Nothing was sponsored there. And from there, we took another flight to Poland, where it was a sponsored trip. And I contacted a couple of local hotels in Krakow and in Warsaw. And the hotels sponsored me to stay there. I had some food tours, Michelin star dining experience. And this whole trip costed us less than $2,000, including flights. And we were able to check out 3 countries in Eastern Europe over 2 weeks. So that's a great example of how you can combine a little bit of your own cost and bring your spouse, your friend along, and still be able to have a very cheap vacation. Now, I want to tell you about hotels, because the second biggest question I get is, okay, you got the flight, it's very cheap, but the next is where I'm going to stay. Now, if you don't have this hang up of staying in always in 5-star luxury resorts and are open to cheaper hotels, then it would really work out in your favor. I don't ever stay in hostels. I've never stayed in bunker beds and those kind of things, but I don't always stay in luxury hotels. So I look for hotels that are boutique resorts, smaller hotels that are properties owned by the locals, and they often have very few rooms but very personal service. And I look for hotels that are centrally located, so that I'm not spending too much time and money on transportation. It's better if I'm in a smaller room, in a smaller hotel, but I can walk everywhere and explore the city rather than just being away and having to rent a car or get a taxi every time. Now, I stay with friends and hosts a lot as well. When I first started traveling, I just made a list of all the places in the world where I knew people. I looked up friends from high school, from college, from my colleagues, or people I knew anywhere. And those are the destinations I targeted on where I want to travel to. And I would call them up and say, well, I'm coming to London for a week. Can I stay at your place? And obviously, they never said no. So that's the pretty much starting point for my affordable travel. And a lot of times I may tag on a trip to stay with a friend. I was in Brazil going for a conference. My husband was presenting at a conference, so I flew with him. And we wanted to stay longer in Rio and explore. And at that point, I reached out through members of Servas, which is a travel host organization, kind of predates Couchsurfing and Airbnb. Started during World War II as a way to exchange peace. And there's a directory of people who are still in it. And so I reached out to a local host in Servas host in Rio and said, well, we want to stay 2 extra days in Rio to explore. And she gave us a room, our own room with a bathroom, and even took us around. Because these are people who are looking to meet other people who are visiting their cities. And the mission is still to exchange those cross-cultural ideas. And this lady is still friends with me till this day. I've stayed with her 3 times since then. Every time I've been to Rio, I generally go meet her, even if I'm not staying with her. So Servas is a great way to, if you join the organization, find hosts. Couchsurfing is another great organization. I know it's kind of questionable now, but when Couchsurfing started, it was the only way to stay with people in their houses. And I went to South Korea. I stopped in Seoul on my way to Bali, where we were doing a Go Eat Give trip. And before I met up with my group, I stayed in Seoul with this guy from America who was based there with the US Army. And he had a house, and he said, yeah, sure, you can have your own room, your own bathroom. And I stayed at his house for 5 days for completely free. And I have also hosted a lot of people at my house through Servas and Couchsurfing. So if you're ever in Atlanta and you're looking for a free place to stay, you're welcome to come stay in my house, where I am right now. Another thing some of my friends do is home exchanges. Now, I personally haven't tried it, but I know other people who have and they love it. With home exchange, what it means is that you trade your house with someone else's. So if you're looking to go to South Africa and you live in New Delhi, maybe that family comes and stays in your house while you go stay in their house. Now, there is a membership fee to join home exchange programs. I think it's about $200 a year. Also, to make sure that you are not a psycho. So, some verification is needed. And in that case, you can find destinations, dates, and people to trade your house with. And then lastly, I think everybody knows about Airbnb. I've used Airbnb several times to stay with other people. And I also have people staying in my house. I rent out a room on Airbnb. It's a lot of times it's cheaper, more affordable way to find a place to stay. But it also gives you the convenience of having access to a kitchen if you want to cook some of your own food, if you have certain dietary restrictions, or like I always have leftovers. If I'm going out for a big lunch or dinner and I have food left over, then if I'm in a hotel, I really don't know what to do with it. But if I'm in an Airbnb or a house, I can store it in the refrigerator and eat it the next day and save a lot of money that way. But the thing I like most about Airbnb is access to local people. Now, I was staying in Naples, Italy by myself in an Airbnb, which was run by this young couple, and they had 4 rooms, so everybody had their own space. And I had heard a lot of things about Naples not being a very safe place for women traveling alone. So that's one of the reasons I also thought the Airbnb option would be great, because this couple would tell me every morning where I should go. We will sit down on breakfast and I'll tell them, here are the things that I want to see today. And this is the kind of food I'm interested in. And they would map it out for me. And they'll say, well, you can go from this destination to here, but avoid that street. Whereas Google Map is not going to do that. It's going to tell you to go through the fastest way, not necessarily looking at if that road is a shady road that you need to avoid because, it's not the best place to walk on your own. So the people that I was staying with were my insider advisors. They were locals and they were watching out for me. So I love that about Airbnb. And then the third cost that you may occur during your travels is food. Obviously, we love to travel because we want to try different foods. And that's one of the things I look for most forward to when I'm traveling, is what the local cuisine is going to be about, where I'm going to eat. So when I visited friends, it was really easy because a lot of times they would cook for me, or we would eat at home. We would cook something together. So you save a lot of money there. But even if I'm not staying with them, I generally reach out to people I know in those cities. Even through Facebook, I may post something. Who do I know who knows someone who's living in Cape Town, which is where I'm going in end of December. And maybe I personally don't know. Actually, I don't know anyone who lives in Cape Town, but I have friends who do know friends who live there. And once they introduce them to me, I will let them know I'm really interested in learning about the local cuisine. Can you help me identify some local restaurants? And maybe I can come to your house and help you cook a meal. And more often, they will feel like, oh, yeah, great. You love to try our food. Why don't you come over and I'll cook something for you? Or you can join my family for dinner. And I did that in Tokyo with some of my friends. I didn't know these people, and they completely invited me over for dinner and cooked me all these different things that they wanted to show. So it doesn't cost anything for the dinner. I always like to take a gift for them to show some respect. And then they also give some great ideas on where you can go try authentic food, which is not oriented towards tourists and super expensive. Because you may often find like the tourist trap restaurants, they don't always have good food, they're super pricey, the service is bad, and you come up with a bad experience. So it's better to find locals and where they like to eat in their neighborhood restaurants, whereas going to more of the traditional restaurants. I like to eat at hole in the wall places. Now, street food can be questionable, especially in places like India, but in Bangkok, street food is amazing and it will only set you back $1 to $5 at the most for a complete meal. So if you can find places like Singapore, Bangkok, Istanbul, Tokyo, street food is great. And then you can save so much money by not having to spend a lot on food. Um, Another thing, when you're staying in a hotel and you go to the concierge desk and you say, "So where should I go eat dinner tonight? Do you recommend any restaurants?" I'd say never do that again, because hotels are really not the kind of place that are sending you to the local restaurants. Go ask the doorman. Go ask the lady, the housekeeper who cleans your room. Those are the kind of places that you really want to go check out, that are cheaper and they're likely to be more authentic and not tourist trappy. So next time, talk to the doorman, not the concierge. I don't know if you like to cook. I love to cook and learn about different cuisines. And I find taking a cooking class is such a great way to get an experience and food at the same time. So most cooking classes would cost about $30 to $50, depending on which country you are in. But that would include about 3 to 5 hours of going to the local market, finding out what the local food produced is, maybe doing some tastings there, and then coming back to a kitchen and cooking yourself along with your instructor. And you come to know so much more about the culture through its food and why people eat certain things, how do they pair them. And in the process, you make friends with other people who have also come to attend the class. You may talk to the cooking instructor, and he or she may have good advice for you on the restaurants that you can go try. And at the end of it, you sit down and have a great meal. One of the best cooking classes I did was in Bangkok and one in Bali. And it's amazing. In the one we did in Bali, we actually cooked 11 dishes over the course of, I think, 5 hours. And we had unlimited beer and we had amazing food. And I don't think I needed dinner the rest of the day because this was such a nice, heavy meal. Plus, I learned so much about Balinese cooking. So that's enough about food. If you have any questions so far, please feel free to type it in the live chat that you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And I'll try to answer those questions as we go along. If you think of them later, then make sure to email me or send me a message, and I'll also answer them in the next session. But we're not done yet, so hold on. Keep streaming. The next thing I want to talk about is activities. So obviously you found a cheap flight, you have found a free place to stay, hopefully with a friend or a sponsor, and you are eating with your friends or taking cooking classes. Now you also want to go check out the attractions and find out what the city is about. My favorite thing to do is a website called freewalkingtours.com. Now, these are all free tours. There are tours of the city in terms of the main attractions. They may be culinary oriented. They may be night scene if you want to learn about the nightlife. They may be about the history, the political aspect of the country. They may be ghost tours, art tours, street art, and literature. There are all kinds of free walking tours. And the best thing is they don't charge anything. You don't need reservations. You just show up there, you meet them, and you just pay them a tip. depending on how you feel the tour was, how the guide was, and how much you enjoyed it. Now, in my trip to Eastern Europe, I think I did a free walking tour almost every other day. Sometimes I did it twice a day. I did one about Jewish history and the neighborhoods in Krakow. I did a walking tour about the food scene in Krakow. I did a few tours in Ukraine around the political history. And then I did a back-to-back about the main attractions, and then street murals and art. And all of them were completely free. So depending on your choice, you can give them anywhere from $5 to $10 if you feel like. But these are a great way to explore the city without a guide. These are people who are actually either they're guides or they want to become professional guides. So they're looking for some training. Sometimes they are college students who want to make a little pocket money on the side. A lot of times they are retired people who are just wanting to do something for fun and talk about the city. When I was in Korea, I found this company called Free Guides. It was actually a program by the Korean tourism in Seoul. And these are retired people who sign up to be volunteer guides. You just specify what day you need them at what time, and they will take you around either the city if you want to go around Seoul or even out of town. So we went to Chuncheon for the day, and we tried the local cuisine there, saw the attractions, and it was completely free. You can tip them if you want, or you can buy them a coffee or a meal. And it's a great way for them to spend some time being worthwhile and having some company. Okay, so now this is when I didn't have my blog, which allows me to spend more money and more planning. But now that I have my blog, and I also write for a lot of publications such as CNN, Travel and Leisure, Fodor's, Cuisine Noir, Cheapo Air, things are a little different. I do get invited for a lot of media trips, and I get reached out by hotels, restaurants, airlines to come and experience them for free, which is, again, why I travel so much. Now, to get to that point, obviously, you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a travel blogger or a travel writer, and I'm going to start traveling for free. You have to build your portfolio, which is how I started. Like I said, in the beginning, it was more of traveling myself and doing a little bit here and there to get something for free. If not, I would pay for it and then write about that experience. So, for example, I was for work in Argentina, and I decided to use the weekend during my office work to go experience Uruguay. It's just across the channel. You take a ferry, and it's a couple of hours you get there. So I reached out to a hotel in Montevideo in Uruguay, and I said, well, I'm interested in writing about your hotel. Can you sponsor me for 2 nights? And they said, yeah, sure. And this is when I was just starting my blog, but I was working full time. And I already was in Brazil, so I bought a ticket to go to Uruguay on the ferry, and the hotel sponsored me for 2 nights. And that's another way I experienced a different country. And while I was in Brazil, also for work, I just reached out to some restaurants in the city, and I said, well, I'm here already. I'm doing some work, but I'm an upcoming travel blogger. I have this blog, goeatgive.com. I would like to come and write about your restaurant. And some restaurants did respond and say, yeah, sure, we will comp you for a meal, and you can come and experience it, which is I would write about a restaurant review about them. So this is how I started, with very, very small, doing local reach out in exchange of a free post. But now it's different. Obviously, I write for a lot of publications. So I work with hotels, tour companies, even tourism departments directly. I reach out to them and say, well, I'm interested in coming to Innsbruck, for example. I was there this past weekend. So I reached out to Innsbruck Tourism, and they said, yes, we will sponsor you from the time you arrive at the airport. I had somebody to pick me up, take me to a hotel. I had a guide, took me to all the attractions, and all the meals were provided for. Now, since you're starting out, I'm guessing you're not all seasoned travel writers. You're still looking to travel for cheap and build your portfolio. Maybe you want to contribute to my blog, Go Eat Give, while you're starting out. A couple of things to take into mind. Definitely go and subscribe to all these airline websites to monitor flight fares. Join these organizations that I mentioned, like Serva, Couchsurfing, Airbnb, where you can get accommodations. And then reach out to your friends to see where they stay and if they are willing to host you. Avoid peak seasons. If you end up going to be paying for a hotel or even an Airbnb, it's better to avoid very busy seasons to go, because prices are going to go up, obviously, and you will not find enough accommodation. Plan in advance as far as you can. Obviously, if you avoid peak seasons, your flights are going to be cheaper as well. But if you plan in advance, you can reach out to some of the local businesses, like the restaurants, the hotels, and explain to them what you're trying to do, and if they're willing to sponsor you in exchange of a post. And they might be willing to sponsor you even if you're contributing to Go Eat Give blog as well. Start where you already know people. Maybe there's a destination you have been to, but you would like to go back to again. Maybe your friends live in a certain city where you can even trade off by staying 2 nights at different friends' places, or you can meet up with them for meals. And contact tourism departments directly, because they are also able to help upcoming bloggers and writers as they want to showcase their destination. Now, think about what are you providing to them in return, because that's the thing they're going to ask you is, so why should we give you something for free? Are you going to write a blog post? Are you going to share on your social media? Who are your audience? Who is following you? So you have to be ready with that kind of answers. And the next thing is just start traveling, start building your portfolio. Look for all these tips that I have given you for traveling for free or for low cost. Remember, I went to about 30 countries before I even started my blog, and that's what inspired me to do that. And maybe you will find your inspiration today. If you have any questions, feel free to post it on the chat on the right side or send me a message later on. If not, then I will see you next week, which is December 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we are going to be talking about traveling for Instagram versus the experience. Death by selfie is like a really big thing now, and I don't want you to be one of those victims. So I'm going to tell you how to create meaningful social media influence and not put yourself in a difficult situation. So thank you for joining me today on Travel Talk with Sucheta, and I hope to see you next Wednesday at the same time. Take care.